So thanks for coming this morning. As I said, my name is Mark Brown and I'm here to talk about the approach that we at TGScapes take to standalone timber frame buildings and looking at some of the benefits, taking you through the process of how you go about securing a building like this and how we manufacture it and erect it for you. And then looking specifically at some advised tips for CIF bids. I should be a bit less than the hour. So if you've got any questions as we go, please feel free to drop them into chat. So just by way of just to go over what we're going to cover today, quick introduction to TGScapes and the benefits of the types of modular buildings that we provide, which are timber framed sectional modular buildings. I'll walk through the process, sharing some tips and experience of CIF bids, and then looking at various building types and uses to give you an idea of just how flexible this approach can be. So just an introduction to ourselves and our mission, if you like. At TGScapes, we really want to be investing in the futures of children and society and the planet by providing education with buildings that help connect to nature, save energy, cheaper and quicker and less disruptive to build. We're also planting forests on behalf of customers to engage students in sustainability and working towards being a net zero company. And we believe that natural eco-building design not only saves money, but can improve educational outcomes and well-being because we use sustainable materials and a sectional modular off-site manufacturing saves energy in construction. We minimize running costs through zero operational carbon buildings, zero carbon buildings in operation. And we use Phillip design principles, which are proven to improve educational outcomes and enhance well-being for staff and children. I'm going to explain how all this stacks up. So first off, just wanted to look at the construction process and why it's quicker and better than other more traditional building methods. The speedy off-site construction uses sustainable materials, which basically saves time and energy. So if you compare a modular classroom build to a traditional classroom build, what you can see is that we can be getting on with certain elements of the process simultaneously. So specifically, we can be manufacturing the components of the modular building whilst the groundworks are going on. Assembly is quicker on site, and then fixes and final inspection. By the time you've finished a modular building, you've saved a considerable amount of time, depending on the size of the building versus a traditional build. So it's quicker. It also reduces wastage in transportation energy because we only move onto site the components when they're finished. There's less time on site, so that there's less damp and other issues that can come, and you've basically got less transportation required. And timber is an amazing building material. It's the oldest building material known to man, and I think in general the construction industry is rediscovering just how great a material it is. It's the only material grown for construction that's truly sustainable with certified schemes. And most of the timber in Europe is registered under these. Timber uses far less energy to harvest and manufacture, and it's not only a carbon sink, it reduces oxygen and releases oxygen and improves air quality during its life cycle. And it weighs less than concrete, and it looks and feels much warmer. What I'm going to do as we go through this morning is to show examples of the research that we do amongst our customers to demonstrate how these buildings actually work and feel in operation. So timber compared to steel and concrete is far less impactful on the environment. So overall, there's about 400 million tons of construction material used a year in the UK. Most of that is concrete, a bit of steel, 7.5 million tons of timber. But timber has a negative impact on your carbon footprint versus steel and concrete. And overall, what you see in the carbon life cycle is that timber is a significantly better material, even if at the end of its life it's combusted. It will still impact the environment to a far lesser extent than concrete. And as well as being the oldest building material known to mankind, it's one of the kindest. So you can see that compared to concrete and steel, it's far less impactful in terms of water pollution, fossil fuel consumption, and smog potential. So overall, we see that timber is a increasingly popular construction material. This is just a point to have a think about. This is some research that was done by the Passive House Trust and Ruth Butler Architects. And what it shows is that for a relatively small increase in cost in the upfront design and construction of energy efficient buildings, you can have a significant saving in operational costs. So one thing to bear in mind as we're going through this is that there are lots of features that these types of buildings can have. For example, solar PV, sun pipes. And if we invest a little bit up front, you can see significant lifetime savings. And when you look at the overall energy use in commercial buildings, what you see at the bottom there is the energy used in manufacturing, transportation, and construction is a relatively high percentage in the early years of the building's use, but a relatively low percentage as you go through the lifetime of the building. And the costs, the energy use really comes in lighting, water auxiliary systems, cooling and heating. So building an energy efficient building in the first instance, that can be A+ rated, it can be carbon neutral in operation, can have a significant impact over the lifetime. So here's the first example of some feedback that we have from customers in education who are using these buildings. Both children and staff have really enjoyed working in this lovely new classroom with easy access to the outdoors for play. A welcome bonus is that we have saved significantly on energy costs. So in this case, there was a demonstrable shift in the money spent on energy. The clever features of our building have greatly reduced our energy bills. And you can see in this building, you've got some solar PV on there and some sun pipes. Sun pipes allow natural light to flow, so there's less need for artificial lighting. We were able to use elements of the eco-friendly design to teach our children about environmental citizenship. One of the things that we believe passionately about is that if you have a building like this within your estate, then it helps stimulate a conversation about environmental citizenship overall. So these energy efficient features reduce running costs. Smart lighting, solar PV, sun pipes, living roofs help reduce water runoff, adaptive ventilation, air source, heating and hot water. And it does allow, with a clever design, to deliver buildings that are zero carbon in operation. And as a company, we're working towards being a net zero company by using timber and the carbon store effect, stopping the use of concrete and moving to helical piles for the foundations, a fabric first approach, use of renewables to provide power and heat, replacing carbon intensive products and high air tightness. And that will ultimately allow us to the delivery of a building that will be zero carbon in its life cycle. And we have a carbon offsetting scheme as well. Well, it's actually a tree planting scheme that does offset a proportion of carbon, but it's really designed to help engage students in sustainability because we plant a tree and we gift it to the school so that students can adopt a tree, they can use an app and track it and chat to it, which we think is a really important feature to help children understand the importance of sustainability overall. Now, I wanted to just look specifically at timber and what difference using timber in a classroom makes versus a traditional materials. And there was a study done called School Without Stress by Whitesir Parkett. And the idea was to try to scientifically demonstrate the advantages of using timber within a classroom and the benefits to students who study within them. And it was a really interesting study, but the key finding was this. This looks at the daily heart rate of students in a standard classroom versus those in a timber classroom. And what they found was that in a timber classroom, overall, the heart rates of those inside, of those using the classroom, were significantly lower than in a traditional classroom, especially at the beginning of the day. So, so they found, in doing the sums, they found that there were 8,500 less heartbeats per day for students working in timber classrooms versus traditional ones. And connecting with nature, natural materials, natural views improves educational outcomes. This is a study of 21,000 students that showed that larger windows improve progress in maths and reading. There was another study that showed that natural views through large windows and doors produce higher test scores, higher graduation rates, more people planning to attend college, and fewer reports of criminal behaviour. So we think that the bespoke natural designs inspire staff and children for long-term educational and well-being benefits. And connecting with nature enhances development, we think. Again, there's another study which shows that children exposed to nature scored higher on concentration, awareness, better reading, writing, maths, science and social studies, working in teams, and improved behaviour overall. So what does that mean for education? Well, we think that timber can help reduce stress levels and create healthy educational environments and reduce the risk of burnout for pupils and teachers. It can create environments that increase pupils' willingness to learn and improve the results, and can have a long-term positive impact on the health of pupils and teachers. And as we know, when we're working, a well-designed space really helps us feel great. The space you're in affects how you feel and perform. So buildings that blend with their surroundings and follow the principles of biophilic design, which is design inspired by nature, using natural materials, by incorporating natural elements, providing easy access to the outdoors, using materials and textures that reflect those in nature. Maximizing the light, a really important part of the design of these buildings is to maximize the amount of light through windows, through doors, and access to the outdoor decking area, to sun pipes, to large sunlights in the roof. Healthy interior air quality and providing views of the natural world outside. Those are the principles behind the design of these buildings, and it's good for staff and student well-being, and it encourages outdoor learning and environmental citizenship, and provides easier access to the outdoors with covered walkways as well. So again, this is from our research. Both children and staff love learning and working in the building due to the amount of natural light and space. Free flow access to a covered deck is a huge advantage, so outdoor learning can take place in all weathers. We've seen a big improvement in their behaviour, and they are much calmer, something we think might be due to the natural lights they have, which was not available in the previous room. Given the children a new setting to learn in has had a big impact on motivation. It's enhanced their imagination and creativity. And it's been a great way to teach them about sustainability and the environment. The environment seems settled and calm, children able to focus on learning, very positive impact on staff well-being. Another point to make is that these self-contained buildings make very special spaces for special needs, and we find a lot of our work is within this area. Because these self-contained buildings provide privacy, security, and peaceful surroundings. And the bespoke designs means that you can design with small breakout rooms, treatment rooms, sensory rooms, and adaptable partitions, so you can have a more flexible space. And this is specifically feedback on buildings used in SEND. It's such a calming environment, and I've noticed that the students are much calmer and more engaged. They like the structure of the room. Low stimulus really works for our autistic learners. Our pupils feel valued and like the roominess and light of their new learning space. The Cedar building also has a warmth that is hard to put into words, but basically they feel comfortable. So that's an overview of some of the benefits that we see our customers gain from these types of buildings. So I thought what we'll do now is just show you the process of what this feels like to go through designing and building one of these on a school setting. So there are these 5 stages. I'm just going to walk through them. So first off, the initial survey, you would have a surveyor, and this is the TG Escapes approach, but obviously other companies like us would follow a similar approach. There's an initial survey where a surveyor visits the site, and checks the available space, checks the ground conditions, the service and access. Sometimes you might need specialist surveys, tree surveys, for example. And once these are complete, then the business can put together an all-inclusive cost that's a fixed price that can be confirmed with the design. So you know exactly what budget you need to deliver this building. Now that process, that part of the process for TG Escapes, we do that at no charge. So we come to your site, we can design, make a design for you, and that's all at no cost. Then we submit them to planning. And when we're doing when we're going through the designs, the design process with you, once we've done that initial survey, things to think about is how much space you'll need to accommodate students safely, and this varies by key stage and special needs, as you well know. And nowadays, obviously, we also need to consider social distancing requirements and access points, because with clever access points, you can manage movement of students in socially distanced ways. Flexible partitions perhaps for different needs, and decking and canopies to provide outdoor learning space. So all these things are considered when we're putting together that initial thinking around the design for your building. Also worth thinking about now is hand hygiene and toilets. So when designing a new building, we can be thinking about putting hand sanitizing options within the reception area, separate toilets for different classes. So all of that can be thought about up front, and because every design is bespoke, you can have exactly what you need for your particular setting. And thinking about future proofing, so thinking about the interior finish to make sure that it's easy to clean, to keep it hygienic, and air circulation, adaptive ventilation, which we use as standard in our buildings, provides good air quality and can be fitted with hygienic filters. So we're then into the sort of detailed design and planning, and the TG Escapes team will manage the planning on your behalf. We do ask for the planning fee at that stage, but that's the first charge that we would make in order to put it into the local authority. And we'll manage that process throughout and deal with any issues raised. So it's something that you don't have to worry about. So these are the types of drawings that we might produce in that initial planning for your designs and put into planning. And then we're into then we start once we've got planning through, and it's fair to say that the planning process it varies by local authority, how long that might take. There's a lot of pressure in planning at the moment, so there's a little bit of a backlog. Although having said that, we're seeing projects move through quite smoothly now. So once the planning is secured and we're ready to go, we're into the construction phase, and this starts with the groundworks and manufacturing that goes on simultaneously. So we first off come on site, make the site secure with fencing and hygiene facilities provided. We schedule deliveries to avoid busy school times, and the foundation technology will be determined by the building size and the ground conditions. So we most often would want to use a screw pile because it has lower environmental impact. But in some cases, there will be a need for concrete if the conditions demand it. We construct the components in the factory, which means we minimise the transportation energy and erection time. And we also keep the self-contained area means that it's totally secure and separate so the rest of the school can operate just as normal. And this is what it looks like. So this is an example of screw piles going in. Then comes the ring beam and floor, then the panels, then the roof, then the cladding, and then the internal finish. So this is sort of various buildings going up at different stages. So here you can see the ring beam going in, and then the panels go up, and roofs. You can have a living roof, a sedum roof, or a normal Evlon ply roof. And then the cladding goes on. We mostly clad in cedar because it's an excellent cladding material, but there are alternatives available. So we have on occasion clad in brick slip and other materials. If the setting has a particular style, then any cladding can be used. We prefer the natural ones ourselves. And then the internal finish, we're currently reviewing the best types of finish given the current circumstances. So we're looking at alternatives to plaster and looking at exposed timber. Again, always trying to improve the sustainability of our buildings whenever we can. This is a time-lapse. So I thought I'd bring it all together and actually show a building going up. I don't think you'll hear the music as I play this, but it shows you a 2-story building going up, and this took around about 16 weeks. So that gives you an idea of what a project will look like as you look out at it at your school. So just wanted to look at other ways that this bespoke modular approach can benefit schools, just other things to think about. There are some additional financial benefits of a self-contained building something like this, which can be used separately to the main school. A separate building provides a bit more flexibility. Out of hours access, so you don't have to heat the main school if you want to provide out of hours access and after school preschool clubs, and even sharing with the space with the local community. It can avoid disruption in other parts of the school. So you might find that having a separate building for a staff room could be a way of staff training is often something that the building is used for. So you don't need to bring external people who you're training into the main school. So that's worth thinking about. And you can generate additional revenue from community groups, early years, meeting spaces and the like, and perhaps access to new grants. So maybe by providing a building which is for staff training or for sports, you open yourself up to be able to access different sources of funding. And at TG Escapes, we provide a free design and planning service, as I said, so we'd be happy to support any funding bids. So if you wanted to put in a bid, we can produce you designs to support that bid. So specifically, I wanted to just take a few minutes to look at CIF bids and what we've learned about CIF bids and some of the challenges that they provide. So I've got 3 top tips. First is I would highly recommend that you appoint a specialist to help. And the second is I'd recommend you appoint a specialist to help. And again, I think a specialist would help no end in CIF bids. We work a lot with Barkers. There are many companies around the country that will help you with a CIF bid. Barkers we know well. And these consultants will prepare and submit your bid at no cost. So there's a 0 risk in getting a consultant involved who really know what they're doing. And it means that if you work with a business like this, you can be getting on with the day job. You've got enough to be doing as it is, where managing a CIF bid is quite a complex process. And so I heartily recommend appointing a specialist. And these are the reasons why. So just to run through the process, there are 3 stages to submitting a bid. There's a stage called outputs, planning, and then cost. Now, each of those need to be submitted by the middle, it's usually the middle Friday in December. And each of those stages need to go in separate PDFs less than 1 megabyte. And I'm mentioning this, and it might sound like detail, but it's not easy to do because there's a lot of content required. So a company like Barker's, we know they employ staff 24 hours a day from the beginning of December to manage the uploads and to overcome the pressure on the server for these CIF bids, because the server is really under pressure. So sometimes they'll need to be uploading in the middle of the night to ensure that they can get them in. So you don't want to be leaving things to the last minute. And if you work with a specialist, they can help with that stress of actually physically submitting the PDFs in the right size to the server. So let's go through those 3 stages. Let's look at outputs first of all. So in the outputs phase, what you need to do here is you must demonstrate the issue. And there are basically 2 types of project that qualify for CIF funding. You might have a dilapidated building, or you might have a shortfall of space. Now, if it's the former, if it's a dilapidated building, and we often find ourselves working in spaces where schools have been using temporary portable classrooms for far too long, and they need replacing, or sometimes there could be an old traditional building that's just beyond its life. So for dilapidated buildings, you need to have a conditions related survey. So that needs to be done professionally. It needs to be photo heavy. You need lots of photography showing the condition of that building. And you need to prove that it's unsustainable to maintain it, that it's costing too much, or it can't be used. You know, there's a project we worked on recently where if the winds got too high, the building would have to be evacuated because it was unsafe for students to be in it. And the report must refer to the relevant section of the condition data collation report. And again, this is where a specialist will help make sure that you've ticked all the boxes to prove your case. If it's the second type of project, if it's a shortfall of space, then what you need to do here is prove that the existing space falls short on the Building Bulletin 103. So that lays out the requirements of space that you need for your particular setting, for your key stage and for your numbers of students. And it could be that your size of rooms are too small. It could be that you don't have enough rooms. It could be the type of rooms aren't right. So you might need a specialist type of classroom. And you must prove that the need can't be met by existing buildings. So you need to be able to demonstrate that clearly. So for example, if you have a science lab that's too small under the Building Bulletin, you can argue for a second lab. Or potentially studio space, art space. So there might be special needs that you have, specific needs that you have that a building could fulfill that can't be done within the main building. So that's outputs. Then the planning stage, the planning phase of the application is you need to show that the initial project planning has reached the point where delivery is achievable. So they need to know that you've got the right team in place, the right contractors, you've considered the planning requirements. You may not have applied for planning yet, but you've understood what the requirements will be. You've assessed the access requirements. That's a really important point. How will you get the contractors to site? You must understand how long the project will take, and you must have conducted a services survey to understand what additional services you might need and what the load on your existing services might be. So that's the planning phase. And then the final section is costs. The cost of the project must come within ESFA standards. And this means that you need to engage the supply chain to understand exactly what the costs will be. The performance requirements must be met. So there's that's almost a hygiene factor, the robustness of the building, the longevity, the energy efficiency, the warranties, they all need to meet the minimum standards. But it's also worth considering air quality, outdoor access, natural light, and COVID-safe student flow. And really importantly, you need to demonstrate cost certainty. So you need to be very clear that the costs that you're putting forward are absolutely certain, and that there's not any risk of overrun or unforeseen costs coming out of the woodwork. So that's a run through of some things to consider about CIF applications, and as I say, working with a specialist would really prevent many a headache. So just to finish off, I thought I'd just show the types of uses that these buildings are used for. So not just classrooms, but staff rooms, teacher training, studios, sports pavilions, canteens, all sorts of shapes and sizes. So there's no limit really to the way that these buildings can be designed to fulfill specific needs. And these are just some examples. I'll just run through them very quickly. So we've actually just completed a second large building at Shotton Hall Academy. This is the first one. It had 3 classrooms, conference room and offices. Simple double classrooms are very popular with a common reception room. Early years, so we do a lot of work in early years because you can provide early years settings within primary schools or separate standalone. Single classrooms are popular. Sometimes you just need one space and you've got a little bit of a space that's not being used. This is a project that was completed last year. This is a twin drama and dance studios, so a very large building at Hendon School with two very large studios with partitions, so they can have 4 operating at any one time. This is a 600 place. This was a building built in 3 phases. So again, something to think about is if you don't have funding for your vision, if you like, you can start by building a phase and then adding on. We've completed a number of projects over 3 phases now, and it can work quite well. This is an example of one that accommodates 600 students in Woolwich. A simple music studio, again, simple standalone room. Performance art studios, they make great self-contained spaces that feel very different from the rest of the school, so the students really enjoy using them. School library, it's an example of building with a living roof and sun pipes, as you can see. Another early years setting, this is at St Francis School, which was this is a standalone nursery with 2 different classes, reception rooms and offices. A chapel, which we did a few years ago at St Philip Howard's. So a really interesting building, single room used for a chapel. Canteen finished recently, so that the school wanted to repurpose its existing canteen for other needs and wanted a more modern solution. So we built them a standalone canteen. So that's everything from me. A run through of how these buildings work. Run through the CIF bid process and showing you the types of buildings that you can design and achieve within this method. I guess any questions?